Imagine walking down a quiet street, the crisp evening air buzzing with the sounds of the city winding down. A woman strolls confidently, her steps steady, her demeanor calm. She seems like just another passerby, but what happens next is anything but ordinary. A group of men, bold and reckless, decide she looks like an easy target. They close in, unaware of the storm they're about to unleash. What they don't know is that this woman isn't just anyone. She's a highly trained elite military operative, skilled in ways they couldn't imagine. As the tension escalates, her instincts kick in, and what unfolds next is nothing short of extraordinary. In this story, we'll dive into the unexpected twist that leaves the would-be robbers wishing they had chosen a different path. Stay tuned to see how this incredible encounter turns into a powerful lesson in resilience and strength. The men surrounded her, their smug expressions showing they thought they were in control. They didn't know her name, her story, or the years of discipline and training that shaped her into the woman she was. To them, she was just a target, someone they could intimidate and overpower. But beneath her calm exterior was someone who had faced dangers far greater than this. She served in one of the most elite military units, mastering skills that most people only see in movies. Her life had been shaped by high-stakes missions, where thinking fast and staying composed meant survival. As the men closed in, her mind wasn't racing with fear, it was calculating. She could hear their mocking laughter, see their overconfidence, and feel the adrenaline building. They had no idea they were walking into their own mistake. She stayed still, waiting for the perfect moment to act. The leader of the group stepped forward, his voice dripping with arrogance as he demanded her belongings. She didn't flinch. Instead, she studied him carefully, his posture, his movements, and the way his friends lingered just behind, laughing nervously. They weren't used to resistance, and her silence seemed to unsettle them. For a brief moment, her mind flashed back to her training days, where she was taught to assess threats with precision. She remembered the drills, the long hours of honing her reflexes, and the unshakable confidence that came with knowing she could handle herself in any situation. These men, she realized, relied on fear to control their targets. But fear wasn't something she carried with her anymore. One of them stepped closer, his hand reaching out as if to grab her bag. She let him get just close enough. Her body was still calm, but her mind had already decided. This was the moment. The air felt heavier as the man's hand moved closer, his smirk widening with confidence. Time seemed to slow, but her mind was razor sharp, every muscle ready to spring into action. She could feel their eyes on her, expecting panic, fear, or compliance. Instead, she held her ground, her steady gaze meeting his. The man hesitated for just a second, long enough for her to make her move. In a blur of motion, she stepped to the side, her movements precise and calculated. Her elbow struck his arm, deflecting his reach, and before he could process what had happened, she had already shifted into a defensive stance. The leader stumbled back, clutching his arm in shock, and the others froze, their laughter replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. "Walk away now," she said firmly, her voice low and commanding. But the group, too proud or too foolish, wasn't ready to back down. They regrouped, their earlier confidence replaced with anger. Tension crackled in the air, the standoff now teetering on the edge of chaos. The leader of the group scowled, shaking off his surprise and stepping forward again. This time, the others followed, spreading out to encircle her completely. Their confidence seemed shaken, but desperation was taking over. She remained steady, her stance grounded, her eyes scanning every movement. Just as the leader lunged again, there was a sudden flicker of movement in the shadows behind them. A quiet but firm voice cut through the tension. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The men turned, startled, to see a figure emerging. a man dressed in plain clothes, but with an unmistakable air of authority. He had been watching from a distance, unnoticed until now. For a moment, the group hesitated, caught between their growing unease and their need to prove themselves. But then, as if to confirm her suspicions, the stranger stepped closer and flashed a badge. He wasn't just any bystander, he was undercover law enforcement. The stakes had just been raised, and the situation teetered on the brink of spiraling out of control. The group froze, their bravado quickly crumbling as the undercover officer stepped closer, his badge catching the faint light. "Hands where I can see them," he ordered, his tone sharp and unwavering. For a moment, it seemed like the situation would de-escalate, but the leader, unwilling to admit defeat, made a reckless move. He reached for something in his pocket, and in that split second, the woman sprang into action. She disarmed him effortlessly, her military training taking over in a seamless flow of precise movements. The weapon clattered to the ground, and the leader found himself pinned before he could even react. The officer moved in, cuffing him while the others stood frozen, unsure whether to fight or flee. As the officer secured the group, he looked at the woman with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "You handled that like a pro," he said. She gave a small, knowing smile, but didn't say much, her focus still sharp. But just as the situation seemed resolved, a car pulled up nearby, its engine idling ominously. The woman's eyes narrowed. Something told her this wasn't over yet. The plot had thickened once more, leaving everyone on edge. The car door opened, and an older man stepped out, looking around with a grim expression. For a moment, everyone tensed, unsure of his intentions. But then the officer recognized him. It was backup, arriving just in time to ensure the situation didn't escalate further. The sight of another authority figure finally broke the remaining men's resolve. They raised their hands, defeated, as the officer and his partner secured the scene. The woman stood silently, her calm demeanor unshaken. The officer turned to her once more, clearly impressed. "You saved lives tonight," he said, his tone sincere. She gave a small nod, her voice steady. "Just did what needed to be done." As the men were taken away, she walked off into the night, her steps as composed as they'd been when the ordeal began. This wasn't her first challenge, and it wouldn't be her last. For her, strength wasn't about proving something, it was simply who she was.